Good morning, everyone. I am Kanika, Assistant Professor in CSC Department in Maharaja Agrasen University, Baddi. Today we will cover operating system topic that is deadlock. In this video, we are going to cover what is deadlock. Then we will see what are the deadlock prevention methods. Then we are going to cover deadlock avoidance methods, and then we will see deadlock detection and recovery. First, we will say what is deadlock. A deadlock is a situation where a set of processes are blocked because each process is holding a resource and waiting for another resource acquired by some other process. In this, a deadlock situation may arise. Let us consider an example when two trains are coming toward each other on the same track and there is only one track. None of the trains can move once they are in front of each other. At this time, a deadlock situation arises because none of the train can move because they are stuck because there is only a single track and two trains cannot move in a single track. So let us consider a similar situation in operating system. When there are two or more processes that hold some resources and wait for resources already held by other process, we will see operating system situation with the help of a diagram. Here is a deadlock example. Here there are two processes, process 1 and process 2, and two resources, resource 1 and resource 2. Process, as you can see in the diagram, is process 1 held a resource 1 and waiting for resource 2 for its execution. Process 2 similar resource 2 is assigned to process 2 and waiting for resource 1 for its execution. Here a deadlock situation arises because none of the processes are executing because they are demanding for a resource which is already held by another resource. This is the example of deadlock. Now we will cover deadlock necessary conditions. Deadlock can arise if the following four conditions hold simultaneously. These are the necessary conditions which must hold for deadlock situation. First condition is mutual exclusion. In mutual exclusion, a resource can only be shared in mutually exclusive manner. It implies not more than one process can also use the some resource at the same time. Means whatever resource you are using in a scenario, that resource must be used in a mutually exclusive way. Means only one process hold a single resource at a time. Another condition is hold and wait. A process waits for some resource while holding another resource at the same time. We will see this hold and wait situation in the earlier example. Here, process here resource 1 is assigned to process 1 and process 1 is holding a resource 1 and waiting for resource 2 for its execution. Similar in process 2, resource process 2 holding a resource R2 and waiting for resource R1 for its execution. If this situation holds, then deadlock situation may arise. Next next necessary condition is no preemption. A resource cannot be taken from a process unless the process releases the resource. Next is circular wait. All the processes must be waiting for the resource in a cyclic manner so that the last process is waiting for the resource which is being held by the first process. As you can see in the earlier example, there is a cyclic form. A cycle is formed in this diagram. If a cycle is formed, then a deadlock situation occurs. Means process 1 is holding means first process is waiting for resource R2 and in circular wait last process must be waiting for resource first for its execution. If this situation occurs, then circular wait condition is fulfilled and deadlock arises. Next is resource allocation graph. Resource allocation graph is a mathematical way to determine if a deadlock has or may occur. Here, as you can see, a mathematical situation G equals to V, comma E. Here, the graph contains V means node and E means edges. V means nodes consist of processes. Here, nodes have consist processes like process P1, process 2, process third, and up until process Pn. And resources type R1, R2, up to Rn. And E are the edges. Pi means PIRJ or RIRJ. In this, an arrow from the process to resource indicates the process is requesting the resource, and an arrow from resource to process shows an instance of the resource has been allocated to the process. As you can see in the diagram, here Pi is the are the edges, Pri is the process, P is the process, and in a circular box there are resources. There are four instances of the resources. Here, as you can see, there is a edge from P to R means process is waiting for resource Ri. And here in this, as you can see in the last diagram, Pi, an edge is towards Pi from R to P, means Ri resource in is held by Pi resource. Process mean, as you can see, process is a circle, resource type is a square. Here four dots represent multiple instances of the resource. Request points to square, request points to square, assignment comes from dot. If the graph contains no cycle, then no process is deadlocked. But if there is a cycle, then there are two conditions occur. If resource type have multiple instances, then deadlock may or may not exist. But if each resource type has one instance, then deadlock has occurred. Means deadlock is definitely occurred. Here, Pi, P1, P2, P3 are the processes, and R1, R2, and R3 are the resources. And resources have only a single instance. Here, as you can see, P1, P1 is waiting for R1 resource, and R1 resource is assigned to P2, and P2 is waiting for R3 resource for its execution, and R3 resource is already assigned to P3. And as you can see, in this, R2 resources have two instances. One instance is assigned to P1 resource, a P1 process, and one instance is assigned to P2 resource or process. And R4 have three instances which are not assigned to any process. In this, a cycle is formed because none of the processes got executed, and because of this, because processes not executed, uh, because of this, a deadlock situation arises. Resource allocation graph with a deadlock. P1 here, as you can see, P1 demands for R1, which is already assigned to P2. P1 holds its execution since it cannot complete without R2. P2 also demands for R3, which is all being used by P3. P2 also stops its execution because it cannot continue without R3. Because without R3 resource, P3 also demands for R2, which is being used by P1 and P2. Therefore, P3 also stops its execution. In this scenario, a cycle is being formed. As you can see, a cycle is being formed in this scenario among all the three processes. None of the process is progressing, and all are waiting for resources which are already being held by other processes. The computer becomes unresponsive since all the processes got blocked. In this situation, a deadlock situation definitely occurs. Deadlock ignorance. Now we will see how we can ignore deadlock. Deadlock ignorance is also known as ostrich method. In deadlock, ignorance is the most widely used approach among all the mechanisms. This is being used by many operating systems, mainly for end users. In this approach, the operating system assumes that deadlock never occurs. It simply ignores deadlock. This approach is best suitable for a single end user system where user uses the system only for browsing and all other normal stuff. As we can see in our daily life, when our mobile phone hangs, what we do? We simply restart our system, or we simply switch off the system and then we restart the system. Means we restart our phone. But in this situation, what happens? A deadlock situation arise, and how we remove this deadlock situation? We simply ignore the deadlock by switching off or by restarting our mobile system. Next is deadlock prevention method. Do not allow one of the four conditions to occur. In deadlock prevention methods, deadlock happens only when mutual exclusion, hold and wait, no preemption, and circular waits hold simultaneously. If it is possible to violate one of the four conditions at any time, then the deadlock can never occur in this system. If we simply neglect those necessary conditions, then our system is deadlock free. How we can ignore, or how we can simply neglect the mutual exclusion condition? In mutual First we will see mutual exclusion from the resource point of view is the fact that a resource can never be used by more than one process simultaneously, which is fair enough, but that is the main reason behind the deadlock. If a resource could have been used by more than one process at the same time, then the process would have never been waiting for any resource. Next is, however, if we can be able to violate resources behaving in the mutual exclusive manner, then the deadlock can be prevented. Now we will see how we can neglect hold and wait condition. Hold and wait condition lies when a process holds a resource and waiting for some resource to complete its task. Deadlock occurs because there can be more than one process which are holding one resource and waiting for other in the cyclic order. However, we have to find out some mechanism by which a process either doesn't hold any resource or does not wait. That means a process must be assigned all the necessary resources before the execution starts. A process must not wait for any resource once the execution has been started. Next is how we can neglect the no preemption, means how can change from no preemption to preemption to ignore our deadlock situation or to prevent deadlock. Deadlock arises due to the fact that a process cannot be stopped once it starts. However, if we take the resource away from the process which is causing deadlock, then we can prevent deadlock. However, this is not a good approach at all, since if we take a resource away from which is being used by the process, then all the work which is it has been done till date now can be inconsistent, means we cannot use that work for further executions. Consider a Let us consider an example. Let us consider example of printer. A printer is being used by any process. If we take the printer away from that process and assign it to some other process, then all the data which has been printed can become inconsistent. Because if a file is being printed and we simply remove the printer from that process, then half of the pages got printed and other half of the pages are just wasted. then all the data which has been printed can become inconsistent and ineffective, and also the fact that the process cannot start printing again from where it has left, because obviously the printing has been start from the starting. uh, Printing, we cannot print the pages from the beginning until we have to give the correct number or order of the pages. Now we will see how we can ignore the circular wait conditions to prevent our system from deadlock. To violate circular wait, we can assign a priority number to each of the process. Means before the execution of the process or before starting at the earliest stages, we simply give priority number to each and every process. A process cannot request for a lesser priority resource. Means a process is already asked for, can a process only requested for a higher priority number. This ensures that not a single process can request a resource which is being utilized by some other process, and no cycle will be formed. By neglecting circular wait, mutual exclusion, uh, no preemption, and hold and wait, we can simply prevent our system from the deadlock. Means what we do from we simply neglect the necessary conditions. We neglecting the all the necessary conditions of the deadlock which happens or which are preventing or which जो हमारे सिस्टम को डेडलॉक करवा रहा हो. Deadlock of next we will cover deadlock avoidance, that how we can if a deadlock situation occurs in our system, then what are the methods that we can do to prevent our system from the deadlock. This method is used by the operating system in order to check whether the system is in safe state. Means safe state means there is no deadlock in the system, or in an unsafe means a cycle is formed, means a deadlock situation is occur in our system. This method checks every step performed by the operating system. Any process continues its execution until the system is in a safe state. Once the system enters into an unsafe, the operating system has to take a step back, because a safe state means there is no deadlock. But if our system um, enters in the unsafe state, means our system having a deadlock, then we have to simply take a step back. Basically, with the help of deadlock avoidance, the operating system keeps an eye on each allocation means resources allocations, and make sure that allocation does not cause any deadlock in this situation. With the deadlock detection, next we will cover deadlock detection, that how we can check our system is in a deadlock situation or our system is in a safe state. By We can check this by deadlock detection method, whether our system is in deadlock or in a safe state. With deadlock detection method, the deadlock is detected first by using some algorithms of the resource allocation graph, as we can already seen previously in previous slides. Resource allocation graph here, as you can see, resource allocation graph. This graph is mainly used to the resource allocation graph is mainly used to represent the allocation of various resources which have single instance or multiple instance to a different processes. If a cycle is being formed in a resource allocation graph where all the resources have the single instance, then the system is definitely in the deadlock state. But if there are multiple instances, then system may or may not be in a deadlock situation. In case of resource allocation graph with multiple instanced resources types, cycle is a necessary condition of deadlock, but not the sufficient condition. Means deadlock may or may not occur if the resources have multiple instances. After the detection of deadlock, a number of methods can be used in order to recover from the deadlock. Means if our system is in deadlock, already in a deadlock situation, means our system is already detected with a deadlock situation, then we have to do something to recover our processes from the deadlock. Means we have to recover the deadlock situation. How we can recover the deadlock situation? We will recover the deadlock situation with the deadlock recovery methods. So the deadlock has occurred already, means the deadlock is already presented in our system and and our processes execution stops because of the deadlock situation. Now, do we get the resources back and again forward progress? No. Process how we can recover the deadlock situation. We can recover the deadlock with the process termination. What we do, we simply terminate the process which are already being executed or which are already in our system for its execution. How we can process terminate? Could delete all the processes in the deadlock. This is very, very expensive because in a deadlock we have, by this statement, we have to simply delete all the processes which are in our system, already in the system. Next thing is delete one at a time until deadlock is broken. Means we start from the, if we have n number of processes, then we first delete the nth process, or we first delete the uh, first process. If we delete one process at a time, then we will check still a deadlock situation is occur in our system or not. If a deadlock situation is there, then we simply delete the next process. We delete the processes one by one until our system is removed from the deadlock. Select next is select who to terminate based on priority. Next is we can terminate processes based on their priority numbers. As you can see, we will provide priority numbers to our processes by which we are simply our processes got executed. Time executed, time to completion, needs for completion, or depth of rollback. Means we simply, this is all, there are all the they are all the methods of that how we can terminate process to recover from the deadlock situation. In general, it's easier to preempt the resource than to terminate the process. In as we can talk in our general day-to-day life, it's more than easy, not we say very easy, but it's relevant to delete resources than to delete process, because what we do in our operating system, we simply wants to execute our processes for our work done. If we cannot delete our process, if we cannot execute our processes, then our work which we want to do in our system, with that work is totally wastage and that work totally stops. Next is resource preemption, that how we can preempt resources. We can preempt resources by first we select a victim. Means we select a resource which we want to delete, because as we can identify which resource is uh, harmful, not we say harmful, which resource is the main culprit, which by which our system is in a deadlock situation. First we find out that resource, or then we select that resource, which process and which resource to preempt. Then roll back to previously defined safe state. Then what we do, we roll back our resources from previously safe state, means without deadlock situation state. Next is prevent one process from always being the one preempted. Means we prevent the resources from starvation. This is all from my side. I hope you will all know what is understand my video of deadlock detections and methods. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.